"Sir, we need you to step aside." That was the first thing the man in the Oak Creek Preserve jacket said as his boots crunched onto my gravel drive. He didn't smile, he didn't explain, he just nodded to the worker revving up a chainsaw at my fence line. From the porch, I set down my coffee. "You're cutting on the wrong side of the line," I told him. Behind me, Murphy barked like thunder. Beside me, my wife Maya's hand brushed mine, steady but tight. She was a physician, used to keeping calm under pressure, but even she couldn't hide the way her jaw clenched when the saw screamed again. The woods had promised us quiet. Every dawn, the mist rose like a benediction, and deer slipped through the trees as if they'd been written into a covenant of silence. After years of city sirens, endless deadlines, and neighbors arguing through drywall, those woods became our sanctuary. 5 acres, that was our slice of it. Not much, but enough. Enough for a gravel driveway, a cabin with a porch wide enough for 2 rocking chairs, and a stubborn patch of wildness no HOA could manicure into submission. We thought we were free. The trouble was, freedom unsettles certain people. Our land sat right against Oak Creek Preserve, a community so polished it looked surgically arranged. Perfect lawns, identical mailboxes, garden gnomes that probably had approval forms. And presiding over it all was Evelyn Reed, president of the HOA and self-declared guardian of standards. The first time she visited, she carried a casserole dish like a peace offering, but her eyes betrayed her. They weren't looking at us. They were scanning, measuring, taking inventory of our gravel, our old pickup, the wood stacked uneven by the porch. That smile of hers, porcelain and practiced, never reached her eyes. We'd laughed about it that night. Reconnaissance, Maya called it. The Queen of Oak Creek taking stock of the barbarians at the border. But Oak Creek didn't laugh long. That Tuesday morning, the covenant of birdsong and rustling leaves was broken by something else. A chainsaw, screaming like an angry machine tearing into the future we'd built. I stepped forward, boots biting into the gravel, and called out over the noise, "Turn it off! Right now!" The saw sputtered and died. The men looked at each other, uncertain, and then all eyes went to Evelyn Reed, standing prim at the edge of my drive, hands folded like a judge waiting to hand down a sentence. Her smile sharpened. "Mr. Vance, Mrs. Vance, this is for the good of the community." Maya's voice cut in, calm but ice cold. "This isn't your community. This is our land." The silence that followed just was heavier than the chainsaw had ever been, and that was when I knew. Oak Creek Preserve wasn't coming for friendship or for neighborly compromise. They were coming for our freedom, and it was going to be a fight. Certified mail for Ethan Vance. The postman's voice carried easy enough, but the envelope he handed me felt heavier than paper had any right to be. White stock, embossed with a polished red and gray crest. Oak Creek Preserve Homeowners Association. From the porch, Maya raised an eyebrow. "Another welcome basket?" I tore the flap. "Doesn't smell like muffins." I read it aloud, each line more absurd than the last. "Dear Mr. Vance, due to recent access concerns and emergency planning developments, you are hereby requested to unlock or remove the gate at your driveway and allow temporary access for the benefit of Oak Creek Preserve residents. Failure to comply within 14 days may result in legal action seeking enforcement of an emergency easement." When I finished, the air between us went quiet, except for Murphy's huff from under the rocking chair. Maya spoke first. "They can't be serious." "They're dead serious," I muttered, "but they're dead wrong." I read that letter 3 times, trying to decide if it was satire or a trap. Community benefit, temporary access. Pretty words, but underlined with steel. Our gate wasn't just steel and concrete, it was a boundary. I had poured the footings myself, 2 feet deep, set against the frost and the fire. That keypad wasn't just for convenience, it was a promise. This was our line, our piece, our choice. And now the HOA wanted it open like a public park. The next day I drove straight to the county office, the letter folded crisp in my jacket pocket. The clerk at the desk, a woman named Lorraine, squinted at the HOA header and gave a low whistle. "Let me guess," she said, tapping her keyboard. "Oak Creek again? You've seen this before? They tried the same stunt with a rancher 2 years back. Claimed emergency access so their landscapers wouldn't have to repave their own road. He hired a lawyer. They backed off." She slid the letter back across the counter. They bluff, they posture, but sometimes they push harder, see if you'll blink first. I didn't blink. That night, I sat at the kitchen table and drafted my reply. No frills, no sugar, just facts. To whom it may concern, the gate, road, and land in question are privately owned and maintained solely by me, Ethan Vance. My property is not, and has never been, subject to Oak Creek Preserve bylaws. No access is granted, temporary or otherwise. Any unauthorized entry will be treated as trespassing and reported to law enforcement. I signed it, had it notarized the next morning, and sent it certified with return receipt. Maya leaned over my shoulder as I slid the envelope into the slot. Short, sharp, surgical, she said. Think they'll get the message? I asked. She gave a thin smile. Not a chance. 2 nights later, the gate went dark. At first, I thought it was the solar charger. Fall haze had been thick. Maybe the battery didn't catch enough light, but when I checked the junction box, my stomach turned. The wires weren't chewed or weathered. They were clipped, clean, sharp, cutter marks. Someone did this on purpose, I whispered into the dark. Murphy growled low at my side, hackles raised. I buried the conduit in steel, installed motion cameras on the trees, and bolted a floodlight above the keypad. I even rigged a trail cam on the slope behind the property. If Oak Creek wanted a fight, I was done being polite. The letter had been the first warning shot. The clipped wires were the second, and deep down, I knew something was coming for the third. Something louder, something bolder, something that wouldn't stop at paper or pliers. Ethan, you need to see this. Maya's voice carried from the study, sharp enough to cut through the early morning silence. I walked in, mug still steaming in my hand, and saw her pointing at the laptop. The motion camera app was open. Playback paused on a grainy frame stamped 2:17 a.m. A pair of headlights glared from the woods beyond our gate. I hit play. The video rolled forward in shaky night vision. A red pickup nosed out of the tree line, tires crunching across my gravel like it owned the place. 2 figures got out, one tall, one shorter, flashlights dancing like thieves. They prowled the edges of my drive, checked the keypad box, and then, clear as day, unrolled a sign. I leaned in. Tell me I'm not seeing that. Maya's jaw locked. The laminated board read, Scenic Trail, Oak Creek HOA Temporary Access Route. I stopped the video, staring at the frame. My land. Their sign. Murphy barked at 2 a.m., Maya whispered. I thought it was just raccoons. It wasn't raccoons. My voice came out low, steady, colder than I expected. By noon, I'd already printed photos from the footage. Tracks in the mud, the dent in the keypad lock, the fresh lumber staked in my soil, all cataloged. I called the sheriff's office and waited nearly an hour before a deputy rolled up, fresh out of the academy, looking more Boy Scout than lawman. He studied the photos with polite detachment. So, just to clarify, you're saying HOA members came onto your land? I snapped. I'm saying they cut power to my gate, drove a truck across private property, and planted a fake public trail. That's not neighborly. That's criminal trespass. He nodded, scribbling notes, but his eyes said civil dispute. He promised a report would be filed. I could already hear it vanishing into a drawer the minute he left. Maya waited until his cruiser disappeared down the road. We need someone who actually knows what they're doing. I know who to call, I said. That night, I pulled a manila folder from the cabinet. Deeds, surveys, title history, every scrap of paper tying our land to us. Then I dialed Joe Sanderson, old friend, better attorney, a man who had chewed HOA lawyers for breakfast. Ethan, Joe answered, voice gravelly even over the line. You sound like you've swallowed a hornet nest. Worse, I said. I've got an HOA building roads on my property. Silence, then a low whistle. Start documenting everything. Photos, timestamps, camera footage. The more they escalate, the more they bury themselves. We'll file an injunction before they even know what hit them. So I documented, every inch. By the end of the week, my drone flew daily patrols over the property. Trail cams blinked red from the trees. Murphy barked whenever headlights dared slow near the drive. And sure enough, the trespassers come back. Tuesday morning, the trail cam caught the same red pickup slipping out of the woods at dawn. This time, it carried lumber, stakes, spray paint. By noon, I'd found their work. Bright orange survey markers stabbed into the earth, a crude line carving down toward the creek, my creek. That night, Maya and I stood by the gate in silence. The floodlights cast long shadows across the gravel. The keypad hummed quietly, restored after I'd armored the wiring in steel conduit. But the peace we had bought here, the covenant of silence and songbirds, felt brittle now, like glass under strain. "They won't stop," Maya said finally. "No," I agreed, staring into the tree line, "but neither will we." The first trespass had been a test. They thought we wouldn't notice or wouldn't fight back. But they'd made one mistake too many. They'd put their fingerprints on my land. And fingerprints, as Joe liked to say, were Exhibit A. "Ethan, you're not going to believe this." Joe's voice on the phone was taut, like a wire stretched too tight. It was late, and I was standing at the workbench in my garage, drone batteries charging beside a stack of printed surveillance stills. "Try me," I said. "They filed an easement claim with the county, 3 months old. Says your driveway is part of a historic trail corridor." I laughed once, sharp and humorless. "Historic? I built that damn drive with my own backhoe 2 summers ago." "That's not the worst part," Joe continued. Papers rustled over the line. "The grantor listed is Charles Langley." The name froze me. Charles Langley was the old man who had sold me this land. Suspenders, pipe tobacco, the oxygen tank he wheeled like an afterthought. He'd passed 5 years ago. "Langley's dead," I said flatly. "Exactly. And the notary who supposedly stamped it retired in 2011. But the stamp date says last fall." My free hand clenched into a fist. "So they forged it, fabricated a trail out of thin air." Joe exhaled hard. "And that's not all. The handwriting matches a board member who used to work in the county land office. Ethan, this isn't bluffing anymore. This is felony territory." I laid the phone down, staring at the papers spread across my bench like a battlefield map. Survey lines, deeds, notarized sales contracts, all clean, all mine. And now, one dirty forgery sitting like a snake in the middle. Maya came in, still in her scrubs from the clinic, exhaustion etched in the corners of her eyes. "What is it?" "They forged Langley's signature," I said. My voice sounded foreign to me, low, simmering. "Claimed he granted an easement for a road, 5 years after he was in the ground." She covered her mouth. "My God. They're not just trespassing anymore. They're stealing the past, rewriting it to box us in." Maya didn't speak right away. She just set her hand on mine, steadying me the way she had steady hands in an ER. "Then we don't just fight back. We expose them." The next morning, I walked into the county courthouse with Joe beside me. He carried a folder thick enough to stop a bullet. I carried a flash drive full of drone footage and camera stills. At the clerk's desk, Joe didn't bother with pleasantries. "We're filing for an injunction against Oak Creek Preserve HOA. Immediate restraining order, barring them or their agents from entering Vance property." The clerk skimmed the first page of the filing. Her eyebrows rose. "Forgery?" "Forgery," Joe confirmed, "of a dead man." By noon, a judge had signed the order. The HOA was legally barred from stepping a toe across our property line, but we both knew a piece of paper wouldn't stop them. That night, I sat at the kitchen table, whiskey in hand, documents spread like a war council. Joe had stayed late, connecting dots I hadn't seen before, parcel transfers, tiny slivers of land bordering ours, all bought in the last 6 months by a holding company no one had heard of, Suncrest Development LLC. I squinted. "Suncrest?" Joe tapped the page. "Registered to a P.O. box in Sedona, same address used for tax filings by Evelyn Reed." The room went very still. Maya lowered her glass. "She's buying up the land around us," I muttered, "boxing us in, piece by piece." Joe nodded grimly. "She wants to create the illusion that your property is inside their development zone, then argue necessity, landlocked hardship, classic encroachment scheme." Maya's voice was quiet, but edged like a scalpel. "She underestimated the wrong family." I leaned back, staring through the window at the dark line of pines beyond the porch. The woods had promised us peace. Instead, they'd given us a war, and now I had the proof. Forged papers, shell companies, and a president willing to resurrect the dead for a signature. Oak Creek thought they were clever, but they just handed me the rope to hang them with. The sound woke me before dawn. Not bird song, not wind through pines. No, this was harsher, uglier, metal screaming against metal. I bolted upright. Maya was already at the window, her face pale in the early gray light. "Ethan," she whispered. "They're at the gate." I threw on jeans and boots, grabbed my phone, and sprinted outside. The noise grew louder with every step up the gravel ridge, until I crested the rise and saw it, sparks showering into the morning air. 2 trucks idled in my drive, their doors stamped with fresh magnets. Oak Creek Preserve, Community Development. A generator roared from one bed, feeding an angle grinder that was chewing through my steel gate. A man in a reflective vest leaned into the blade, cutting like he was dismantling junkyard scrap. Another stood nearby with a clipboard, jotting notes. And presiding over it all, arms folded, sunglasses gleaming, was Evelyn Reed. She looked like she was inspecting a painting, not orchestrating a felony. "Turn that off," I shouted, striding down the gravel. The grinder hesitated, sparks sputtering to silence. Everyone turned toward me. Evelyn's smile was porcelain, practiced, unchanged. "Mr. Vance," she said, her tone syrup over steel, "you've left us no choice. This is an emergency development measure, temporary access only." Maya had followed, standing at my side now. Her voice was calm but lethal. "You're trespassing. You're destroying private infrastructure. And you're violating a court injunction signed less than a week ago." Evelyn's smile didn't falter. "The injunction doesn't supersede provisional zoning allowances." I barked a laugh. "Provisional zoning allowances? That's not even a thing." I pulled out my phone, camera already rolling. "Let's get this on record," I said loudly. The man with the clipboard shifted uncomfortably. The grinder operator stepped back. But Evelyn didn't budge. "You can film all you like. The community requires access. The Eastern Ridge cannot remain landlocked due to one man's stubbornness." I took a step closer, close enough to smell her perfume over the stench of hot steel. "You don't have the right to a single inch of my road. You don't have the paperwork. And you don't have the law." Behind me, I heard Murphy barking from the porch, a furious echo. That's when I pulled the trigger on my trump card. With one tap, my drone lifted from its charging dock by the porch and buzzed overhead, camera live streaming every angle. It circled the trucks, hovered over the grinder, zoomed in on Evelyn's folded arms. "Smile," I told her. "This footage is being backed up to 3 different cloud servers as we speak." For the first time, her smile cracked. Only a flicker, but I saw it. Minutes later, the sheriff's Steve crunched up the drive. This time, it wasn't the rookie. Deputy Mathis stepped out, older, grayer, the kind of man who had seen enough property disputes to smell a lawsuit before the tires cooled. I handed him the injunction copy, the deed, the thumb drive with footage. "They've been warned, they've been served, and now they're destroying my property." Mathis turned to Evelyn. "Ma'am, did you knowingly bring heavy equipment onto this land despite this order?" Evelyn tried to hold her ground. "We were informed by a zoning liaison." He cut her off. "That's enough. Step aside." The crew folded fast. The man with the clipboard muttered about not getting paid. The grinder operator shut down his machine, eyes glued to the gravel. One by one, they started loading tools back into the trucks. Evelyn stayed last, still trying to wear her porcelain mask. But when Mathis read her rights, her hands finally twitched. The trucks rolled away, leaving my gate mangled, my gravel scarred, and my blood boiling. Maya slipped her hand into mine. "They thought they could bulldoze us," she said softly. I nodded, watching the dust settle. "They've made their move. Now it's our turn." That morning, I didn't feel like a landowner anymore. I felt like a man at war. And Evelyn Reed had just declared herself my enemy. The courtroom smelled faintly of wood polish and old carpet. The benches were nearly full, neighbors from Oak Creek, a few curious locals, even a man with a notebook who looked suspiciously like a blogger hoping for fireworks. I sat beside Joe Sanderson at the plaintiff's table, hands folded tight to stop them from drumming on the wood. Across the aisle, 3 lawyers in tailored suits leaned together, smirking like wolves who thought they'd cornered a deer. Behind them, Evelyn Reed sat stiff and regal, phone in hand, pretending none of this was real. The bailiff called the case. Judge Halverson, a sharp-eyed woman who looked like she'd spent her career cutting through nonsense, took the bench. "Counselors," she said, voice brisk, "we're here to consider the injunction filed by Mr. Ethan Vance regarding unauthorized entry, property damage, and alleged forgery by Oak Creek Preserve HOA. Mr. Sanderson, you may begin." Joe rose slowly, buttoning his jacket like he had all the time in the world. "Your Honor, my client purchased his land outright. His deed is clean. His title history is clean. And yet, despite this, Oak Creek Preserve has attempted to seize his driveway through falsified documents, physical trespass, and," he gestured to me, "perhaps we should let the footage speak for itself." He tapped his laptop. The projector flickered to life, filling the courtroom wall with my drone's footage, sparks spraying from the grinder as my gate screamed under assault. Evelyn was front and center, arms folded, giving orders like a foreman. One of the workers muttered on tape, "Karen said it was fine." The room went silent. Even the blogger stopped writing. Judge Halverson leaned forward. "Is that Mrs. Reed on the footage?" "Yes, Your Honor," Joe said smoothly, "President of Oak Creek HOA, directing the destruction of my client's property despite a court-issued injunction." The tallest defense lawyer rose, clearing his throat. "Your Honor, the HOA acted within emergency infrastructure guidelines, based on verbal assurances from a zoning liaison. This was not—" "Verbal assurances?" Halverson cut him off, voice sharp as a gavel strike. "You attempted to justify cutting through a steel gate with a conversation?" The lawyer stammered. "Your Honor, the community, she snapped, "is not on trial. Your client's actions are." Joe wasn't finished. He slid a packet across to the judge. "We also submit evidence of a forged easement, supposedly granted by Charles Langley 5 years after his death. The notary stamp used was retired in 2011. This is felony-level fraud." A ripple of murmurs ran through the gallery. Evelyn shifted in her chair, the porcelain mask slipping for the first time. "And there's more," Joe continued. "We traced multiple parcel purchases along Mr. Vance's borders, all bought in the last 6 months by a shell company, Suncrest Development LLC. He flipped to the final page, voice rising just enough to carry. "The managing address for that company is a P.O. box in Sedona, Arizona, the same box used by Mrs. Reed for her personal tax filings." The gallery erupted, gasps, whispers, even a low whistle from the back. Evelyn's composure cracked, her jaw clenched as she looked straight ahead, refusing to meet anyone's eyes. Judge Halverson raised a hand for silence. "Enough. I've heard sufficient evidence." She leaned back, voice measured, but unmistakably final. "The injunction stands. Oak Creek Preserve HOA and its representatives are barred from entering Mr. Vance's property. The forged easement will be referred to the district attorney's office for investigation. And given the evidence of shell company activity, I am also ordering a forensic audit of HOA finances." The gavel struck once, like a gunshot. Court adjourned. The gallery buzzed with conversation as people rose. Some stared at Evelyn with open hostility, others with curiosity, but no one with sympathy. I sat back down, exhaling for the first time in an hour. Joe packed his files with the calm satisfaction of a hunter skinning his kill. "That," he said under his breath, "was only round 1. Maya slipped her hand into mine. Her grip was firm, but her voice was soft. "They just lost the crowd. Now they'll get desperate." I nodded, watching Evelyn sweep past with her lawyers, her smile gone at last. "Let them," I whispered. "Desperation makes people sloppy, and sloppy makes them mine." "Did you see this?" Maya's voice was tight, almost shaking, as she set her phone on the kitchen table. The screen glowed with the headline of a neighborhood forum post. "Local couple escalates conflict with HOA, refuses community cooperation." I skimmed the text, bile rising with every line. According to the anonymous author, we had provoked the HOA, refused reasonable compromise, and endangered Oak Creek by blocking emergency access. They painted us as selfish hermits, hoarders of land needed for the greater good. It was propaganda. Maya folded her arms. "They're trying to turn the neighbors against us." "They won't," I said, though my jaw was grinding. The footage is out there. People saw it in court. She shook her head. Footage doesn't matter if Evelyn controls the narrative. Half the neighborhood just wants someone to blame. 2 days later, the campaign went public. Leaked emails, posted online under the title, Vance Hostility Timeline. Except they weren't real. Fabricated messages supposedly from me, snarling at neighbors, threatening to shoot trespassers, even mocking Oak Creek families. Maya slammed her laptop shut in disgust. This is libel. It's Evelyn, I muttered. She knows she can't beat us in court, so she's trying to dirty us in the street. The problem was, it worked, at least at first. We stopped by the hardware store in town, and I felt the stares. A cashier who used to ask about Murphy now avoided eye contact. Someone muttered "selfish prick" under their breath as I passed. By the time we got home, my blood was boiling. They want a villain, I said, pacing the porch. So they invented one. Maya touched my arm. Then we show them who the real villains are. That night, Joe called. They're scared, he said bluntly. That's why they're lashing out. But fear makes people sloppy. We've got leaks of our own. He sent over an attachment, internal HOA emails obtained through a homeowner revolt group that had quietly started forming. The subject line was damning. We either secure the access route this fall or expansion dies. The sender? Evelyn Reed. The recipient? The same cousin tied to Suncrest Development LLC. Maya read it twice, her voice trembling with controlled fury. She admitted it, in writing. Exactly, Joe said. They framed you as hostile while admitting their scheme was about expansion money, not community safety. I leaned over the table, staring at the glowing screen. The HOA had tried to drown us in lies, but now we had the truth, a spear point sharp enough to pierce their porcelain armor. Still, the campaign left scars. One night, headlights slowed at the end of our drive. A rock clattered off the mailbox. Murphy barked furiously until the car sped off. Another evening, we found flyers stapled to telephone poles. Say no to gate tyranny. Maya tried to shrug it off, but I saw the tension in her shoulders, the way she double-checked the locks every night. This isn't just about land anymore, she said quietly. It's about survival. They want to break us down before the next round. I wrapped my arm around her. Then we'll be unbreakable. The smear campaign made one thing clear. Evelyn Reed was willing to scorch earth to get what she wanted. But what she didn't realize was that every fire she lit only cast more light on her crimes. And Joe had already drawn up our next move, a civil suit, not just against the HOA, but naming board members personally. If Evelyn wanted war in the court of public opinion, fine. I was ready to drag her into a court that mattered. The courthouse clerk raised an eyebrow as Joe slid the thick stack of filings across the counter. Another injunction? She asked. Joe shook his head. Bigger. He tapped the cover page with a finger. Civil suit, property destruction, emotional distress, fraudulent easement, and misuse of funds. Not just against the HOA, against the board members personally, including Mrs. Reed. I stood beside him, silent but burning. Watching the clerk stamp the file felt like watching a hammer drop. That night, we sat around the kitchen table, the three of us, Maya, Joe, and me. The air smelled of strong coffee and printer ink. This changes the game, Joe said. It's one thing to hide behind HOA dues. It's another when your own house is on the line. Evelyn's board members, they'll start to sweat, and sweating people make mistakes. Maya leaned forward. You're betting they'll turn on her. I'm betting at least one of them has more loyalty to their wallet than to their queen, Joe replied. I stared at the folder lying between us, heavy with affidavits, photos, video stills, and the damning email about expansion. For months, they had pushed, trespassed, lied. Now, finally, we were pushing back. The fallout started faster than I expected. Within a week, 2 board members resigned, citing personal reasons. Another sent me an email directly, clumsy, apologetic. I thought we were negotiating access, not staging a land grab. I didn't know Evelyn was forging documents. Maya read it and snorted. Too little, too late, but Joe just smiled. That's fear talking, which means we're close. Evelyn, of course, doubled down. At the next HOA meeting, video of which leaked almost instantly, she stood at the podium, porcelain smile painted wide. This is nothing but a vendetta. she told the crowd. Mr. Vance is weaponizing the courts to punish us for seeking compromise. But Oak Creek will stand together. The video showed her words, but the camera also caught the audience. Arms folded, eyes narrowed, people whispering to each other. The tide was shifting. Meanwhile, the forensic audit ordered by Judge Halverson dug deeper. What started as irregularities became glaring red flags. Tens of thousands in consulting fees to companies that didn't exist 6 months ago. Landscaping bills paid twice. A $28,000 transfer to Suncrest Development LLC signed personally by Evelyn. When the news reached me, I sat back in my chair and laughed out loud. She dug her own grave, I said. Joe didn't laugh. He was already drafting subpoenas. But victory had its shadows. We found another flyer on our mailbox. Stop the gate tyrant, support Oak Creek. Someone spray-painted Hermit across the gravel at the end of our drive. Murphy barked at shadows almost nightly. Maya's hand never left the pepper spray she kept in her coat pocket. One evening, after we patched a hole someone had slashed in the fence line, she turned to me. How far are you willing to take this? I met her eyes. As far as they force me to. The next morning, Joe called with a voice like steel. Ethan, brace yourself. The DA's office just opened a criminal investigation. Fraud, forgery, misuse of funds. Evelyn isn't facing just your civil suit anymore. She's looking at prison. I looked out the window at the woods, golden in the morning sun. The silence felt different. Not fragile, but waiting. She wanted a war, I said quietly. Now she's going to get one she can't win. The headline broke like thunder across the county website. HOA President Evelyn Reed indicted for fraud, forgery, and misuse of funds. I sat at the kitchen table, coffee growing cold, rereading the words as if they might vanish. Maya leaned over my shoulder, her hair brushing my cheek. She's done, she whispered. They finally got her. Murphy barked from the porch, as if echoing her triumph. But I didn't smile, not yet. The arrest came 2 nights later. Neighbors filmed it on their phones. Evelyn, yanked from her own HOA meeting by deputies, still in her fleece vest with the HOA logo stitched over her heart. Some said she shouted about injustice. Others said she stayed quiet. Porcelain mask finally cracked. Within a week, 3 more board members resigned. The HOA bled credibility like a sinking ship. Homeowners demanded audits, refunds, and answers. The fortress of Oak Creek Preserve was crumbling brick by brick. But wounded animals are the most dangerous. It started with the lights. One night, every floodlight on my drive went dead at once. Cameras caught nothing but static, as though someone had jammed the signal. When I went outside to check, the keypad box hung open, wires dangling. Sabotage again, but cleaner, more deliberate this time. Maya stood beside me, flashlight steady, her voice low. She still has people out there. Loyalists, I muttered. Or fools. 2 days later, a truck slowed at the edge of the property. Not Evelyn's red pickup. This one was black, tinted windows. A bottle sailed from the window and shattered against the gravel. Flames licking at the ground until I stamped them out. Murphy barked furiously, paws tearing at the earth. Maya gripped my arm. This isn't intimidation anymore. This is escalation. I nodded, jaw tight. And it's the last line they'll cross. Joe came up that weekend, bringing with him a private investigator. They canvassed the property, installed fresh cameras with backup batteries, and even rigged a seismic sensor in the gravel drive. If they try again, Joe said grimly, we'll have them dead to rights. Don't just think civil damages anymore, Ethan. Think criminal charges stacked on top of each other. We're building a wall of evidence no jury can ignore. That night, I lay awake listening to the forest. Every crack of a branch made me sit up. Every gust of wind against the shutters felt like footsteps. Maya whispered in the dark, "Do you think she ordered it? Even from jail?" I shook my head. Doesn't matter if she did. Someone's carrying her torch, and they're going to slip up. The slip came sooner than I expected. One of my trail cams captured it. 2 men, faces half hidden, dragging gravel bags from the back of a truck onto my property line. They thought they were laying the foundation for another access route. What they didn't know was the cam had infrared, clear as day, license plate, faces, tools in hand. I forwarded the footage to Mathis, the one deputy I trusted. By dawn, the men were in cuffs, charged with trespass, vandalism, and criminal conspiracy. Under questioning, one cracked fast. He admitted they were helping Evelyn finish what she started. When the DA heard that, he smiled for the first time since I'd met him. They just tied her sabotage directly to criminal conspiracy, he said. She's not just going down for fraud anymore. She's going down for orchestrating trespass and vandalism. Maya exhaled, her shoulders dropping for the first time in weeks. So it's over? I looked out at the gate, still scarred but standing, floodlights humming steady. Almost, I said, but not until every last piece of her empire is gone. Evelyn Reed had once ruled Oak Creek Preserve like a queen on a porcelain throne. Now she sat in a cell, her loyalists in custody, her board in ruins. The war wasn't over yet, but the battlefield was ours. The courthouse smelled faintly of old wood polish and nerves. By the time Maya and I stepped inside, the gallery was already full. Neighbors from Oak Creek sat shoulder to shoulder with locals from town, curiosity and quiet anger buzzing in the air. Some brought notebooks, others simply stared, eager to watch the downfall of a queen who had ruled too long. Evelyn Reed entered last. Even in handcuffs, she carried herself like royalty, chin lifted, lips painted in defiance. But the eyes betrayed her, darting quick, sharp, searching for an ally in the crowd that wasn't there. Her lawyer, a tall man in an ill-fitting suit, shuffled papers nervously. He looked less like a defender and more like a man walking into a storm without an umbrella. The judge, Honorable Patricia Halverson, banged her gavel once. The room fell silent. People versus Evelyn Reed. Charges include fraud, forgery, conspiracy to trespass, vandalism, and misuse of funds. Counsel, are you ready? The prosecutor rose with a calm confidence I envied. Ready, Your Honor. Evelyn's lawyer stammered. Ready? The prosecution wasted no time. Exhibit A, the forged easement document, with Charles Langley's dead hand supposedly signing away my driveway. The courtroom murmured when the retired notary's invalid stamp was projected on the screen. A handwriting analyst followed, detailing each forged stroke like a surgeon explaining a disease. Then came the drone footage, the screen filled with high-definition images of trucks grinding through my gravel, men unloading equipment, and Evelyn herself standing smugly, with arms crossed while sparks flew from my gate. The room gasped when the angle grinder screeched across the steel, sparks showering like fireworks. The prosecutor paused the footage and turned to the jury. This is not negotiation. This is trespass. This is destruction. This is a crime. Evelyn's lawyer tried to push back. He claimed emergency access provisions justified her actions. He invoked community necessity. Judge Halverson leaned forward. Counselor, show me the statute. The man flipped through papers, sweat beading his temple. It was a verbal assurance from a zoning liaison. The judge's voice cut like a blade. Verbal assurances do not grant legal rights. Move on. The defense never recovered. Next came the money trail. A forensic accountant laid it bare. Tens of thousands of HOA dues siphoned to shell companies linked to Evelyn's cousin. Payments for consulting that never happened. Landscaping bills that matched the exact size of Evelyn's personal garden, not common property. Homeowners in the gallery muttered angrily, some shaking their heads, others taking furious notes. And then, the final nail. An email, obtained through subpoena. Evelyn had written it herself 2 months before the forged easement was filed. If Brady won't sell, we create the necessity. Build the road, force the precedent, lock him in. The words glowed on the projector like a confession carved in fire. When it was Evelyn's turn to speak, she stood, her chains clinking softly. I did what I did for the good of Oak Creek, she declared, voice shaking but loud. One stubborn man should not hold back progress. He lives in his own world, cut off from the community. I tried to give us all a future. The prosecutor rose smoothly. By forging documents, by cutting gates with grinders, by paying your cousin with stolen HOA dues. Her words faltered. Her porcelain mask cracked. No further questions, Your Honor, the prosecutor said. The jury deliberated for less than 3 hours. When they filed back in, no one looked at Evelyn. The foreman stood, cleared his throat, and read, On all counts, guilty. The gallery erupted. Gasps, sighs, even applause muffled behind hands. Evelyn stood frozen, her face pale, lips trembling. For the first time since I'd met her, she looked small. Judge Halverson's voice rang clear. Evelyn Reed, you are hereby convicted of fraud, forgery, conspiracy to trespass, vandalism, and misuse of funds. Sentencing will be scheduled, but you are remanded to custody immediately. Bail denied. 2 deputies stepped forward, taking her by the arms. As she was led away, then Evelyn twisted back toward the gallery, her eyes locking with mine. For a moment, it was just the 2 of us. Her glare carried no power now, only bitterness. I didn't look away. When the gavel fell, the air shifted. The reign of Oak Creek's queen was over. Maya squeezed my hand, whispering, "It's finally done." I exhaled slowly, the weight of months lifting off my chest. "Almost," I said, watching the empty defense table. "But we'll see how deep her rot goes." Because though Evelyn was gone, her kingdom had cracks that ran far deeper than anyone realized. The morning after the verdict, the woods felt different. The same pines stood tall, the same creek murmured in the ravine, but the silence was cleaner, lighter. For months the air had carried tension, like waiting for a storm that never ended. Now, for the first time, it felt like calm had returned. Still, calm doesn't fix a broken gate. The grinder had chewed it nearly in half, and the bolts I'd once trusted were twisted and scorched. I called in a contractor I knew from town, a quiet man named Harris who'd built ranch gates all over the county. When he saw the damage, he whistled low. "Looks like they went to war on you." "They did," I answered flatly. "Then let's build you a fortress." For 3 weeks, Harris and his crew worked dawn to dusk. They tore out the ruined steel and poured new concrete footers deeper than before. The new gate rose like something out of a military compound. Solid plate steel, recessed keypad, intercom, and cameras mounted high with overlapping fields of view. This time, I added license plate recognition and motion alerts to my phone. Harris even embedded a passive seismic sensor under the gravel, so I'd know if a truck tried to sneak close in the dead of night. Murphy supervised from the porch, tail-thumping approval every time a weld sparked. Maya kept a notebook of every upgrade, every detail logged. "Not just security," she said. "This is testimony, proof that we didn't back down." But the rebuilding wasn't only metal and wire. One afternoon, a man from Oak Creek came walking up our drive carrying a pie and a foil tin. His name was Richard, a neighbor I'd only seen from a distance. He looked older, worn by the ordeal. I wanted to say, "I'm sorry," he began, awkwardly shifting the pie between his hands. "Most of us had no idea what Evelyn was doing. We thought she was negotiating access, not—" His voice trailed off as his eyes flicked to the scarred gravel where her trucks had once parked. Maya took the pie gently. "Sometimes the people in charge don't speak for the rest," she said. Richard nodded, relief in his shoulders. "If you ever need hands for repairs, or just someone to keep an eye on things, you've got neighbors willing." It wasn't forgiveness, not entirely, but it was a start. That night, I walked the perimeter alone. The floodlights clicked on in sequence as I passed, the forest glowing pale under their beams. Every corner post now had a marker sunk in concrete, certified by the county surveyors. No loopholes, no misunderstandings. I stopped at the southern ridge where Evelyn's people had once tried to carve their road. The dirt still bore faint scars of tire tracks, but at the center stood a new monument Harris had helped me place. A granite stone, 4 feet tall, etched with 5 words. This land was not for sale. Beneath it, a brass plate, private property, keep out, surveillance active. I ran my hand over the cold stone. It wasn't anger anymore. It was closure. Back at the porch, Maya poured us 2 glasses of whiskey. Murphy curled at our feet, snoring softly. "To surviving hell," she toasted. I clinked my glass against hers. "To winning it." The woods answered with silence. Not the tense silence of waiting, but the true kind. The silence we had bought, defended, and finally reclaimed. The first snow of the season came early that year. By dawn, the pines wore white cloaks, and the creek hummed under a thin skin of ice. From the porch, I watched flakes drift across the rebuilt gate. the granite monument standing like a sentinel at the southern ridge. Maya wrapped a blanket around my shoulders, her breath visible in the cold. "Strange," she murmured. "How quiet feels different now. Not fragile, not threatened, just ours." I nodded, sipping coffee. We bought land, but we earned peace. Life settled into new rhythms. The county sent surveyors to recertify every boundary, driving iron posts deep into the earth. The DA still called occasionally, updating us on Evelyn's sentencing. She was facing years, decades maybe, but the outcome didn't matter anymore. Her power was gone, her empire dust. Neighbors from Oak Creek visited more often. Some brought tools, others just apologies. Slowly, the fence between us became less a wall and more a reminder, a line respected, not challenged. Even Richard, the man with the pie, showed up one weekend to help clear fallen branches. I realized then that victory wasn't about isolation. It was about choice. The choice to decide who entered, who stayed, who shared our fire on winter nights. One evening, Maya placed a new brass plate at the base of the granite monument. I leaned close to read. "Freedom is defended, not granted." She smiled faintly. "For the ones who come after us. So they'll know the fight wasn't just about a gate." I traced the letters with my fingers, the metal cold, but the meaning warm. That night, as the wind moved through the trees, I sat on the porch with Murphy at my feet and Maya beside me. I thought of Evelyn Reed, the queen who had believed no one could resist her will. In the end, it wasn't her HOA, her forged papers, or her hired enforcers that won. It was a gate, a granite stone, and two stubborn souls who refused to bend. The forest kept its promise once more: silence, dignity, freedom. I raised my glass of whiskey, letting the firelight dance in the amber. "To the land," I whispered. Maya clinked her glass against mine. "And to never giving it up." The snow fell steady, erasing the scars of old tire tracks, covering the ground in white. And for the first time, the woods truly belonged to us, uncontested, unbroken, and ours forever.